That's not bad at all. Less than 40 pounds of gear.
So, you have finally decided to go winter camping. Your friends convinced you, you realize that there's less people in the woods, it's a hell of a lot more quiet. Outside of big game season, you don't have to wear bright orange without getting shot. There's a lot less bugs and creepy crawlies to worry about. But then you realized you have absolutely no freaking clue what you should bring with you, all right? So that is what we're talking about today. A basic winter camping setup and all the fundamentals behind how to plan your first winter camping trip. Let's go. Welcome back to Grunt Proof, guys. I'm Randall. I came onto this subject because I just finished up a pretty cool trip with a buddy. I've got some other winter camping trips coming up, and even these guys who know me pretty well and kind of come from a similar background were asking me all kinds of basic questions, or at least what I thought would be standard. And so I figured, you know, there's a lot of people getting into this hobby all the time. I just wanted to put together my list of the basics and the principles behind it all. So even if you don't like a specific item that I'm talking about, if you understand the principles I'm going to throw out, then at least you can find what will work for you. Hopefully the YouTube chapters will catch on to this and do it for me. If not, you can look down in the description later on and I'll have all this stuff listed. If you want a checklist that you could print out and actually go through when you're setting your stuff up, go to the website gruntproof.us and you can find it there, print it out, take it with you, and now you've got a list that friggin' you won't forget anything. Now, because I'm such a nice guy, I'm going to go ahead and read out the entire list of categories. So if there's something you don't want to hear, you know where to skip ahead to hear what you need to hear. So you're going to need a pack to carry all your stuff in. It's going to be a lot larger than the packs you're used to carrying in the summer. You need a way to protect your gear from the elements, like waterproofing and such. You're going to need a shelter. You're going to need some kind of sleep system, whether it's hammock, underquilt and stuff, or sleeping bag and mat on the ground. We'll cover that. Extra layers. You're going to need base layers, mid-weight, warming layers, outer layers, hard shells and stuff like that. You're going to need extra socks, or at least thicker socks, and maybe something thicker to sleep in. You're going to need gloves and hats and maybe a scarf, balaclava. You're going to need some kind of hygiene and sanitary stuff. Some kind of first aid kit, no matter how big or small you want to carry. You're also going to need some kind of repair kit. You should probably have some kind of charging device or spare batteries for all of your electronic devices. You might want to consider some kind of personal locator beacon, a Garmin InReach, the Mini, or if you're a radio guy, make sure you've got a radio where you know you can hit repeaters. You might want to put together a little survival kit with at least some fire starting materials in there, just in case it does get a lot colder than you thought, or maybe you get into some kind of an emergency. You can save your life. And you might want to consider bringing an axe or a saw or something to process wood with. All right, so that's the main topics we're covering. Feel free to skip ahead. So let's talk about clothing and layering. This is pretty much the standard clothing I'm wearing if I'm not hiking a whole bunch or moving over rough terrain. Probably something some of you guys are going to be doing. I'm fine with just wearing my standard clothes. Now, the whole point is we have multiple layers, okay? So this fleece plaid Dickies top, it's nice and warm. It's got a liner in it. This is not for snow or wet weather. We will get to that. It's just something kind of big and heavy to put on. It does stop the wind and it keeps me nice and warm. Under that, you should have probably your mid-weight or medium weight layer. There's all kinds of materials out there, right? You got the Army, what we call waffle tops from the Equix system. You've got merino wool. You can get like 120 to like 320 weight. This is just a fleece freaking zip up. Got a burn hole in it. And this is totally fine for me, at least for this context. So under that, you're going to have probably your base layer. Now, merino wool is the latest craze. That's what this is. This is a 320 weight merino wool base layer. It's nice and warm and toasty. You get the breathability and warmth of wool and all that cool stuff. The Army Equix base layer, what we call the Ninja top and bottoms, those are fine. They're synthetics. I've had the same pair for like 15 years now, and they will do just fine. So don't feel like you got to go out there and spend a whole bunch of money just because of some new tech that they're telling you is new and it just costs a whole bunch. What's more important than spending money on new stuff is knowing how to layer properly, right? So base layer, something on your skin. If it's heavy activity, we're talking about like some mountaineering and freezing cold temps, a fishnet shirt, something that lets that heat get off of your body and actually get away from it and evaporate is a good idea. But again, we're just talking about meandering through the woods and setting up a camp, and we're mostly stagnant, right? So something like this, totally fine. I am wearing merino base layer leggings under this. I've got some nice thick socks inside the cowboy boots. Again, casual camping, guys. So when it comes to layering, it's going to be different for everybody, right? When I'm down to like the teens temperatures, I might have 5 layers on me. It depends on if we've got any wetness or what the wind conditions are like. What I'm wearing walking around my property, where I know I can just get right back to the house, it's going to be totally different than what I'm wearing if I'm out in the woods all day. And it's going to be different if I'm hiking or if I'm sitting still. If I'm riding the ATV out all day in crazy winds and low temperatures, I might have 6 layers on because now I've got to deal with 50-mile-an-hour winds, possible precipitation, and it gets freaking cold. So just remember, you're going to have to look at your layering system differently for every single trip you do. If it's going to be a dry cold or very humid, if it's going to be a temperate environment, you need to readdress your entire layering system. And there's going to be some minor changes you're going to have to check out. Right, so we got a light rain jacket, and it is large enough to fit over all of the winter layers I plan on wearing. Don't get one that fits just your body with nothing on. You got to remember you're going to have all these warming layers on, right? Let's get to the meat and potatoes. You're going to need a larger pack. So how big? It's going to depend on you and what you're doing. This has become my favorite lately. This is the Crossfire CF2 ruck. It's expensive, but it's freaking awesome. I'm usually good with a 40 to 55 liter ruck, something you can add stuff onto the outside, improve your sustainment capabilities. You can strap an extra sleeping mat or whatever you need to on the outside. But the point is, your winter camping bag it's going to be a lot bigger than you thought. That's what she said. Going down the ruck, you're going to need something to protect your stuff from the elements and possibly you. Right? That means a wet weather bag, a large contractor bag, a freaking big trash bag, whatever you want. But you should consider water will get in there, right? So we're not talking about fording rivers and you know, using this as a survival flotation device, but any kind of precipitation, snow, stuff, wetness will eventually get in there, and that's not fun. Nice, tough, freaking easy to close wet weather bag. It's whatever OR is, outdoor research, I guess. It doesn't matter, guys. Get one that's actually waterproof. That's the whole point. So when we talk about getting into camp, now we've got to talk about shelters, because that is the #1 thing that is going to protect you from the elements. Your camp, hanging out, and also if you got into a bad situation and you had to shelter from the elements. Unless you're a freaking grunt doing OPs and patrol bases and you have no choice, you got to get something over your head. But let's say you are doing grunt stuff and you need to get out of the elements and you can't put up a shelter, okay? Well, the Army Gore-Tex bivvy is still freaking awesome. You're not going to survive summer monsoon rains down in the south in this. It'll eventually soak through. But, you know, if we're talking about snow or light, cold rain, you'll be just fine, especially if you're under a pine tree and you got a little bit of overhead cover. So these are just fine. I will still cowboy camp with these every now and then, and we're good to go. But again, we're talking about basic camping, right? So most people go to a tent, all right? What kind of tent? Well, the easiest one to start with is what we call a freestanding tent. It's going to have a frame, which is tent poles. You're going to lock it into either the bottom of the tent, and then you're going to clip it up to it, and then you're going to put a rain fly over it. This Light Fighter 1 tent is essentially a slightly lighter, more expensive copy of the Army ICS tent. Something like this, it's heavy, okay, so you're not backpacking with it, but they are tough as nails. They will last years, and they can become 4-season tents. And what does a 4-season tent mean? Well, not much. Usually it's just thicker material, thicker bathtub floor, The bathtub floor is what comes up on the sides to stop rain and snow from coming in. That's all going to be thicker. Some of them even have a liner to them. They should also have probably 2 walls, and that's to let evaporation and not have moisture build up on the inside of the tent. Like this light fighter does have a liner you can buy with it, but I've never had problems with it. Before you go buy a 4-season tent, because they're bigger, bulkier, heavier, and more expensive, just try experimenting with a tougher, maybe slightly heavy freaking, 3-season to 4-season tent that's not specifically 4-season. Okay, so like these heavy-duty military tents, they will hold snow. And as far as snow goes, the material of the tent is not what's going to save you from a snow load. What you want to look for is how the angles are, the pitch of the tent. So I've had a trekking pole ultralight tent that packs up to like that big. It weighs about 1 pound or less. And it seems rinky-dink, but it's called a Pira-Ohm because it's got such a steep slope on it. Snow would never accumulate on it. It would just run right down it, right? And I never had a problem with heavy rain on it because all the water would just run right down the sides. So this is a budget tent that's pretty freaking awesome. It's called Nature Hike. I think you can get them in the States. If not, you could order it from Europe and get it sent to America, pay the import fees if we have those. I don't know if we have those yet. And it'll still be cheaper than the typical backpacking tents. And these are freaking fine, man. This is a 2-person one. And in the winter, you might want to consider using a 2-person tent because it doesn't fit 2 people comfortably, right? So let's talk about a 1-person tent. It's barely going to fit you and your gear. Most likely a 1-person tent, call it a half-person tent. It's going to fit you and some things comfortably, and your bag or ruck is probably going on the outside, hopefully under a gazebo. So if you're considering that and you want to have your bag and everything inside the tent with you, look for a 1.5-person tent or maybe even a 2-person tent. You got a lot more space for you and your tent and everything, and you also have more air room. So you're not just freaking sweating the thing up and then freezing it overnight. So the nature hikes are good. I've got a 1.5-person nature hike that I've been testing. It's only this bulky because I have everything they sent with it. But this, actually it's a half-person tent. This one actually compact down to about like that, like the size of a Nalgene bottle. But I've got the ground mat and everything with it because I want to test it and show it off. Now the thing with ground mats, like these heavy-duty military tents, you don't need the ground mat, all right? Unless you're in like an alpine region or an area with just like, I don't know, anything super sharp on the bottom. If you're in most like temperate areas, like woody areas or like sandy areas, you don't really have to worry about that. Just check where you're setting up your tent. But if you're on like super rocky terrain or something with, I don't know, manzanitas freaking sticking out, you might need that extra ground sheet. Now what the ground sheet does, it protects the bottom of your tent because they try to make that the thinnest material possible. It'll also prevent moisture from coming up, seeping up from the ground into your tent. Now, if you've got a sleep mat and a good sleep system and you've done everything else right, it's not a big deal if the moisture seeps up into the tent through the floor. But just remember, it's going to seep up and then it's going to start to seep out. So you're going to have to pay attention to where your stuff is laying on the floor of your tent because the water will eventually soak everything. All right. So that's one aspect I could see where the ground mat would actually be useful, even if the terrain doesn't call for it. And with that, now we're going to get to sleep systems. Okay, so most of you guys understand the concept. If you're on the ground, you need some kind of sleep mat, something to get you off the ground. You need some kind of sleeping bag. You might want to have a bivy or something extra. If you're in a hammock, a lot of people don't realize this, but hammock camping in the winter is fun as hell. I like having just a seat I can sit on, so if the weather's really bad, I can pull my tarp down a little bit. I got plenty of space to relax, and I don't have to like hunker down in my tent hiding from the weather. I could just hang out in my freaking hammock, sit around, drinking my coffee, watching the crappy weather, and my buddies huddled up in their tiny little tents. However, Hammock camping in the winter, it's kind of an art form. It's definitely going to take some finagling and learning. So with that being said, you've got all kinds of materials, all kinds of companies out there for sleeping bags. You have down, you've got synthetic. Those are your two types. Now, most of the ones I've messed with over the years are fine, okay? I think the biggest problem people make is they look at the comfort rating or even the extreme rating on the sleeping bag, and they trust that without actually going out there and trying it themselves. Me, for an example, from the Gulf Coast, I'm a freaking cold sleeper, big time. So if I've got a sleeping bag that is a 20-degree bag, I'm not going to take that below the upper 20s. Because I know if I get down to 20 in that thing, that is definitely going to be the limit for me. So that's a good rule of thumb. Get a sleeping bag that's probably rated for 10 degrees colder than what you're actually sleeping in. And I know it sounds crazy. Again, the people from Canada are laughing about that. But you're a newbie. You've got to experiment for yourself. And there's a good way to test this stuff, just like with most of the other gear you're going to take with you. Go outside in your backyard and do your first camp and all your new gear and your new setup. Do it in your backyard and actually set it up like you're going to camp for real and actually sleep out there in your backyard or on your balcony, wherever you are. That's the perfect opportunity to really test yourself. Hey, does this 20-degree bag actually keep me warm in 20 degrees? And then you go out there at 10 o'clock at night, fall asleep. You realize at 1 in the morning, your freaking legs are cold. Okay, well, the bag alone is not great. I need to add my leggings. I might need extra socks on my feet. You might notice there's cold spots where there shouldn't be. But the bottom line is, if you go out there and it's 2 in the morning and your entire system has failed, all you got to do is get up and go back in the house. So you can go grab the gear that you should have brought in the first place, add that to your system, finish off the night, and see how the test goes. If you're just miserable and you got to get up at 4 in the morning to go to work, well, then you can just go back inside and you could say, test failed, take some notes, figure out what you got to tweak. I do that all the time when I'm playing with new stuff. I've slept 20 feet away from the cabin, hearing family noises and all this silliness going on right there in the cabin, and I'm sleeping out there in a hammock on 2 cedar trees, feeling like a dummy. But I know if everything fails, I could just get up and freaking walk back in the cabin. I know you guys want to see the show and tell, but I don't want to push products in this video. All right, but this is a Thermarest X-Therm Neo Air, all kinds of titles to it. Winter sleeping mat. It's rated at like an R6 or something like that. One major mistake people make is they've got a great sleeping bag, they've got all these other warm clothes, they go out and they camp in the winter, and they're still cold all night, and they can't figure out why. Okay, I'll tell you what, guys, it doesn't matter how expensive your sleeping bag was, or what the reputation of it is, or how warm it actually feels. If your sleep mat sucks, or it's not good enough for you, your whole system is garbage, all right? So, if you're going to spend a lot of money on something or really invest time and research into it, check out the sleeping mats. Get a good one. All right, so this one is expensive as hell, but it's an R value of 6. So if it gets below 40 degrees and I'm sleeping outside, I'm breaking this one out. Guaranteed. Keep in mind, when you're blowing up an air mattress in freezing temperatures, you're essentially putting a whole bunch of moist air into your sleeping mat. In some cases, your body's not keeping that mat warm enough, and that moisture will actually freeze inside of your mat, which will then make you colder and kind of render your sleeping mat useless. Most of the good companies issue a pump bag with their air mattresses. You can also invest in a decent battery-powered portable air pump that you can carry everywhere and just pump up your mattress real quick, and either with the pump sack or the electric pump, you get rid of that problem completely. This is another option if you're worried about the inflatable stuff. This is the Savoda, like Finnish military sleeping mat. What's cool about this one is this rubber coating and extra material on the outside. So you can sleep on it either way. I believe it's rated at about 2.5 R value. So it's not super warm, but you can combine it with other things. You can bring your crappy inflatable mat and put it on this. I've noticed if I sleep on this thing, on this rubberized outer material, I feel my body heat radiating a little more. However, you've got to pay attention to the terrain. So if you're a soldier sleeping out there in the field in the mud, you might want to put this rubberized exterior on the outside, on the ground, so you can sleep on this inner kind of felt feeling material. But again, if I'm sleeping in a tent or I've got a ground sheet or something, this thing is nice and toasty with my body heat radiating off of this. It also has like extra material on it that comes out like a sheet. So if you are sleeping in the dirt or the mud, you know, you can set things along it and kind of keep them clean. This one is pretty good. This is the 4Class Trek 500 inflatable sleep mat. It's pretty freaking thin, but I do like the shape it has on it. And it has these kind of like rubberized gummies on there, so it doesn't slip around your tent bottom, or you flip it up and your sleeping bag's not slipping off of it. This one is also about a 2.4, 2.3 R value. So if I only had this, I might combine it with something like this, all right? So at least this will get me off the ground, so that mat doesn't have to do all that work. I get some extra cushion, and I've also boosted the R value a little bit. As far as hammocks go, that's a true art form. So if you're not comfortable sleeping with hammocks already, like kind of like expert in the warmer months, you might want to definitely try the backyard hammock setup, because with a hammock, I know some people talk about throwing mats inside of the bottom of their hammock, but I've never seen that actually work for people, okay? You got to remember, your hammock is conforming to your body, okay? So unless you've got a huge, like wide mat, the mat is not going to be able to come up enough to get rid of all these air pockets that'll cause cold spots. Plus, the mat is a lot more rigid than a under blanket, right? So you're going to have gaps and stuff. So I suggest you invest in a decent under blanket. What does the under blanket do? Well, you've got your sleeping bag in the hammock, and then remember, you're just suspended in the air. So you just have this cold air, freezing air and everything, just whipping up from under you. Meanwhile, your body is up against the bottom of that material, which is like a super thin nylon. Sometimes it's like parachute silk, and your body is just leaking warm air out from under you. So for me, I love hammock camping in the summer, and I'll get down to probably like the 60s before I have to switch to an under blanket. Considerations with down versus synthetic sleeping bags. Down, if it's good quality stuff from a company with a good reputation, it's going to be a lot warmer. It's going to be twice as light as the freaking synthetic stuff. It's probably going to be twice the price though. So if you're like an ultralight type person, if you want the lightest possible stuff, you'll love that stuff. I got a 20-degree ultralight bag from Enlightened Equipment that it cost almost $400, but it actually is good to 20 degrees. It packs down to like that size, and it weighs like a pound, right? It's insane. However, down is a lot more expensive, especially if you want a good one that's going to last more than a year. Another problem with down is it's not very good in temperate or humid environments. So look at a lot of the backpackers, through hikers who only use down. They're mostly in the western areas where it's pretty freaking dry. Look at the backpackers who go through the Appalachian Trail, and they begin, you know, in the cold, wet months, and they will always complain about their down sleeping bags because it just gets soaked. In the humidity, everything gets soaked, all right? Once down is wet, especially soaked, it's essentially useless. It might as well be cotton. Synthetic is a lot more durable. You're still going to get most of the warming properties, even if it's damp and super humid. The temperature goes up and everything just sweats and is coated, and then the temperature freezes at night. Now you've got frost all over your crap. The synthetic will handle that a lot better than down. Also, down is just ridiculous to maintain, all right? Go look up videos how people have to maintain their down sleeping bags. The one I have, I will never clean it ever. I'm just going to keep using it until it stops working, and then I'll probably trash it because I'm an old grunt. We throw stuff in the washer and dryer. So synthetic stuff is a lot easier to maintain. It's going to be bigger, bulkier, heavier, but it's going to be cheaper, and you're going to be able to beat it up more. So further in this bag, we got the First Light leggings. To me, these are just as good as the wool ones, even though they're synthetic. But the best part about these is they can be zipped off, right? So there's nothing worse than freezing in camp all morning and then you start moving and realize you should have taken your freaking pants off. Well, guess what? You can stop real quick, pull your pants down, unzip these, rip them off. You don't have to remove your boots and pants and everything else. You just got to freaking slide them down, zip this crap off. As far as pillows go, this is totally fine for most applications, even in winter sometimes. However, I have found that just like the sleeping bag, because I'm blowing air from my lungs, wet air into it, my pillow will actually start to get a little bit cold. I always have something extra with me. So it could be I didn't need my leggings that night. Maybe my extra mid-weight I brought was good with my base layer. And so now my thicker fleece jacket is too warm. So I could put all this stuff together, you know, wrap it up in my shamag and tie it. And now I've got a nice, large, fluffy, warm freaking pillow to put on. Or let's say my outer jacket that I was wearing is going to be too big and heavy or it's too warm for my sleep system. Well, now look at this, guys. I just freaking roll this up. I can put my shamag around it, and I've got a beautiful, warm, fluffy pillow instead of these crappy little camper freaking pillows that you've blown wet air into and now it's frozen. You got these standard neck gaiters. Pretty much everybody has one. You know, it's not hard to stuff this in there. You can tie it at one end, however you want to do it, or you just freaking bunch it up in there. There you go. That would work as a pillow. You can stuff more stuff in there. You could tie it at one end to make sure it's not all falling out on you at night. But either way, you know, little tricks like that. In my opinion, I don't like to carry out big fluffy bed pillows, but having a larger pillow that's soft and large and more comfortable and it doesn't have my frozen breath in it, I think that's a pretty big plus for winter camping. You should bring an extra pair of socks, right? People don't realize how much your feet sweat. Even if you're just sitting there, your feet are sweating a lot. Think about it. You got freaking leather winter boots on. You know, your feet aren't breathing that well. So changing your socks is already a big step in keeping your feet warm. You could put on the clean pair of socks when you're ready to bed down. And if it's merino wool and stuff, you could flip the dirty pair of socks inside out. And then you could throw that over your fresh pair of socks. Now you've got an extra layer on your feet. What a lot of people like me do who have cold feet is we use booties. This is some ultralight company. I wish I could remember the name, but these are down, but they've actually held up for over 5 years, amazingly. Now, you're not walking through the woods with these, but you can kind of meander around camp with them, depending on the terrain, right? But these are super warm because they're down, and they're reasonably tough for how long they've lasted. And look how they pack up, okay? So throwing these on your feet is freaking, for me, it's kind of a make it or break it. If everything else in my setup is perfect, but my feet are cold, I might as well trash the whole system. That's how crappy it is for me. These are the Wild Things tactical booties. They're synthetic, but you'll notice they're a lot bigger, bulkier, more robust. You can see they got this canvas bottom. I've worn these in all kinds of freaking environments, and they not compress nearly as much as the down ones, but they are warmer and they're 10 times tougher, right? So I've never had to worry about destroying these. Not at all. Make sure they're not tight fitting. So you see this has a little bungee cord on it. You don't want to have this stuff tight at all. As a matter of fact, I don't even tie these down ones. I don't even pull them tight. And every now and then one will slip off my foot at night. But you don't want to be constricting your feet at all. So you want these to be large enough to fit your feet into with socks. Okay, now let's get to hands. If I am doing activity, these have been the gloves I've probably used for, I don't know, man. Look at them. These things are beat to hell and they still work. These came with our Equix system. Okay, Gore-Tex. No idea. That's how used and old these are. You guys screenshot that and figure it out. But they're Gore-Tex cold weather flyers gloves, all right, Army issue. These are great for movement and work in colder environments. And I do like how they come up, all right? So screwing around with campfires and stuff, you're good to go, man. You got the flame resistance, leather palm. However, if, you know, back in my grunt days, if I was sitting in an OP or just sitting stagnant all night, these were not good enough, nowhere near enough. But ruck marching, working, activity, something like these are awesome. Winter flyers gloves. My favorite go-to, if I'm not doing any kind of heavy work, are just the wool liners. You can get these for like $2 sometimes. I like to buy them a hell of a lot smaller than my actual hand size. So I think my hand glove size is like a 6 or 7, and these are a 4 because they stretch out and they fall apart. And see how that fits. This is a size 4. So I like to get these a lot more snug, and you still have plenty of room, not choking the hands. Wool gloves, man. So as long as it's dry and I'm not doing any kind of heavy work, these are beautiful. The beauty of these is, guys who have worked with me in the field, you'll see me do this. So I have these in my bags. Sometimes I'll have an extra pair of my plate carrier or my chest rig. And then I might have these clipped onto me. Sometimes, depending on what I'm doing, I'll have these lighter mechanics gloves clipped onto my pants. So they got the leather palm, and these are the work gloves, work or activity, all right? And then when I'm stagnant or I'm in camp or going to sleep, I throw these on, okay? These don't have to be tough or waterproof or anything. Let's say I wanted to be old school. Well, I could get the actual gloves that go with the liners. Now, a problem with these is you got 0 dexterity, okay? But if it's freaking heavy snow or super cold, you want these to be probably a size larger than your typical hand size, so that you can get these wool gloves in there without cutting off any blood flow. And you got the little tightening strap, so there you go, man. I've already done a video on mittens and how important those are. Like if I'm out on the ATV in freezing temperatures, I've got these on, and then I've got the giant, clunky, old school freaking army mittens on, because high wind and freezing temps, that will murder your extremities. Now, because I do love the mechanics stuff, these are the winter mechanics. It's a Durahide. It's freaking bovine leather. And it's fleece lined, okay? So they're basically like, you know, those old school gray construction gloves we all still use for crap. It's basically like that with a fleece lining. Now, I've only had these for a couple months, and they're okay. Again, you're losing dexterity. The leather palms is great, man. You're touching wet stuff, you're touching hot stuff, pointy objects. You know, anytime I'm working out on the property in freezing temps, you know, you want that freaking tough leather stuff. The problem is if your hands do start to get too warm, like let's say I'm just walking a whole bunch on the property, doing a whole bunch of heavy work, you know, your hands are going to start to sweat. You're going to want to take these off. Now you got sweaty hands in the freezing weather. So they have their purpose, all right? But I'm still kind of playing with them, and I'll let you guys know. Had to pause for a coffee break. The Grunt Proof Roast. Only the finest. Tastes like diesel and hate. Appreciate you guys sticking around. I know this is a long one, but we got to get a lot of information out. So let's get into some of the other basics. We're going to cover food, water, and first aid, and then we'll get into some comfort items. So as far as food, I think the smartest way to do it is to calculate calories, okay? So you can use BMR calculators, estimated on activity and how far you're walking and what the temperatures are like. It's based on your body weight and everything. And just think about calories, all right? So I'm into strength training and I'm freaking active and I'm always looking at what I'm eating. So I pretty much know the calories I need to take out with me, okay? So I've got 2 bags. We've got the backpacker meals that you heat up with boiling water. You pour it in there. We've got a couple of those. We've got electrolytes. We got plenty of coffee. Everybody loves their coffee. And I have multiple Ziploc bags, all right? All the stuff is waterproof, but I take a Ziploc bag to put it in and an extra one with the coffee. So then I have a trash bag, all right? We don't want to be trashing the woods or throwing messy food stuff in our bag, you know. So you should have a trash bag. We got like cappuccinos and protein powders in there. This is more of my snack bag that's on the outside. It's got some coffees in it, but this is kind of like, you know, we got like the little barbecue chicken, protein bars and stuff. Got my breakfast, like a drinkable breakfast, and I got another Ziploc bag in there. So if I don't need that Ziploc bag as a trash bag, but it's raining horribly, I could steal that extra Ziploc bag and protect my gloves or whatever extra stuff I didn't protect from the beginning. So calculate the calories you're gonna need per day and then go off of that. That's probably the best way to do that. And then you can do the same with water. So I've got this 2-quart canteen, good old Army stuff. It lasts forever. So we got 2 quarts there, which is about 2 liters. And then over on the other side, we've got our liter Nalgene bottle and our cook cup. So they do have a Nalgene bottle that's steel that you can actually boil water in. But I actually like using these cook cups, right? So put them on fire, put them on stoves, whatever. I like these big old cups, and I don't like boiling water in my liter freaking stainless steel bottle. So I'm okay with the heavy plastic. It's fine. Again, we're doing basic camping. We're not backpacking. And these weights don't balance each other out. So we've got 2.2 pounds of water here, and then we've got about 5 pounds of water on this side. So just something to consider if you are walking a decent distance. You're going to want to balance your ruck out a little bit. So the way I did that was I had my light but bulky sleep stuff and warm stuff on the side with the heavier 2-quart canteen. And then I've got my tent that's heavier than all of that on the side with the 1 liter bottle. So it kind of balanced out, not perfectly, but good enough. So at least my ruck's not leaning the whole time I'm walking. Extra consideration. So with that being said, like a good old Grunt right here in the water purification tab pouch, I've got water purification tablets. Okay, so whenever you're camping, you should consider water collection. It's a skill that they don't really teach even in the infantry anymore. It's pretty sad. But you should have some kind of method to collect, filter, or purify water, or all the above if you want to. And wherever you're camping, just pay attention on the map to what water sources are around you. You know, if you're worried about stagnant water and stuff, or you're not sure about the snow, you know, maybe it's all yellow snow. Just make sure you have at least some points where you know you can go to get extra water. So, you know, again, we're talking about basic camping. For me, 3 quarts is plenty in the winter. But I got the purification tablets, and then we have our cook kit, of course. But along with the cook kit, so we've got our little gas canister. It's propane butane, and these will last a couple camps for me. So you need to pay attention. They have the bigger ones you can carry that'll last, you know, multiple trips. The little ones, I know what I can get away with, but wrapped up in that, I can clean my cooking cup with this. You know, this is the Army cravat, just a freaking old style bandana, cotton. So I can clean up stuff with this. I can filter water with it. If I have to, I can freaking cut it into pieces and use it to help start fires. I do have fire cheating stuff, but it's always good to have another option. But this is a basic filtration device. As far as the stove, these little BRS stoves are just fine, man. I like that they're tiny and ultralight. They work fine, and they actually give you an extra gasket. That's freaking cool, man. So if your gasket in there falls out or wears out, they give you an extra one. So I've used these BRS stoves for freaking years. No problems with them, man. They're great. Ultralight, tiny. Just don't lose them in the field. That's why I keep them in these bright green bags, so I don't drop it and lose it. So hygiene, wet wipes. If you're in the field for an extended period, you should think about wet wipes to actually bathe. You still got to clean yourself, even if it's freezing cold. But generally, I carry about half a freaking pack of baby wipes, even if I'm going out for one day or one night. So I mentioned power, right? Some kind of battery bank. This is Dark Energy. That's pretty dang good. All right, so this is kind of like my tool bag survival bag. This is just like a towel bathroom organizer I've had forever. I've done a separate video on this. You can go check out. This is my little mini first aid kit. So again, we're not doing tactical grunt stuff. We're not storming castles or anything. This is like, we're talking about basic camping, okay? So I don't need cat tourniquets and large gauze and stuff. We're gonna be dealing with small boo-boos here. But this has medicine, electrolytes, I don't know, probably some other cool stuff in there. Generally, if I cut myself in the field, if it's minor, I usually just put duct tape on it or whatever tape I have. That's how I do it. You can use super glue, which your repair kit should have some super glue in it, or all-purpose glue. But let's say I am worried about, you know, maybe it's like a freaking gash that's kind of opened up and I want to make sure I'm treating it properly. I got some kind of antibiotic ointment to throw on there. This also works as a burn cream. You can use chapstick or Blistex as a burn cream as well. And speaking of that, like I always have chapstick on me, the winter type. Being a southern boy, if my hands are exposed for too long, especially in high winds, my knuckles will just start to crack. They just get destroyed. So chapstick, it's good for this. You can put chapstick on your cheeks if those are getting chapped. You can also put it on your knuckles or anywhere you're getting chapped, okay? So don't think about chapstick as just for your lips. So we also got a couple more purification tablets. Probably need to restock that stuff. And then on the other side, we just got some kind of like field work survival stuff. So fire starting kit with an extra Bic lighter. That's always good to have. So we got the little fire cheaters. The larger tea light is good. And, you know, none of this is tactically set up because, again, we're doing basic camping. This is my field repair kit. We got some rubber bands, some string. I got the large sail needle. I got some Velcro stuff in there. We got duct tape on the outside of it. You know, the way I see it, if you're doing like an overnight or even like 2 or 3 nights camping, if something gets destroyed, you're pretty much going to be okay. Repair kit is so small. You know, I do get bored in camp. So if I rip a button off of something, you know, I got a needle and buttons in here. While I'm bored at camp sitting around the fire, I'm probably fixing that button. If you got a small tear in your tent, like your floor or something, you know, you put the super glue on there and some duct tape, and that'll work. That'll get you through the camping trip. Just remember, if you're using tarps or something, duct tape to repair a tear and a tarp is not going to work. That's where knowing knots and having cordage works, okay? So let's say you hang up a tarp, it's high winds, the winds catches it and just rips the grommet right out of your tarp. You're not going to duct tape that and be able to fix it again, but you can get a loop around it. You can put a rock inside the tarp, wrap it up, tie it however you want, get the string on it, and now you can at least fix that tarp back up to the tree. All right, so this is, I think 36 bank line, just like string, man. That's it, string. And the only reason I have this instead of 550 cord is because it's cheaper. 550 cord has become so popular, it's just crazy expensive now. This stuff's dirt cheap. Now, people laugh about this, but if we're talking about fires in cold, damp environments, I would suggest you get a bellow, all right? You can lay down in the prone in the mud and snow and, you know, try to suck start a freaking fire all night or keep one alive when it's just super damp. Or you can kind of just sit back like this and you can target that air. And guys, if you haven't used one of these, just try it. Just freaking try it. Next time you got a stubborn fire that everything's just so freaking wet, it's hard to even keep it going. You don't want to waste all your cheating stuff. Get the smallest little flames and get all the kindling and stuff around there and just friggin', I mean, plus it's fun. You can hand it to your kids and give them something to do in the camp. Okay, some bonuses. I mentioned personal locator beacons. Something that if you get into trouble, you can be saved. All right, if you're a radio guy, make sure you're actually able to talk to those repeaters. So if that's all you brought was your ham radio out there, as you're walking into the campsite, you might want to check. Make sure you can hit that repeater and somebody will answer you. Once you get to camp, check in again and make sure you're good to go. I'm a big proponent of not getting into trouble. Let's mitigate the trouble, okay? So look at how most hikers, just everyday hikers, get lost. Not backpackers and mountaineers stuff, but Your average hiker gets lost when they leave the trail for a short duration, okay? It's usually going to pee or poop because the general rule is to get at least 100 feet off a trail. So there's a lot of people, kids included, who just go off of a trail. They walk on out and they're thinking, well, I'm walking in a straight line. I know how to get back. They're not walking in a straight line. They're following the terrain pretty much, not realizing it. They get out there, they do their business, you know, they smoke a cigarette, they talk on the phone, they look around, take pictures, and then they turn around to go back to the trail and everything looks completely different, okay? One of the most important things, even me as a guy who I've always felt comfortable in the woods, I always have a freaking compass on me, okay? Always. I have gotten turned around, and guess what? Besides freaking out, the best thing I did was I'd pull out my compass, grab my map, and check my directions, and be like, oh, that's where I parked the quad, or that's where I left the trail. And this is something you've got to train. It's so much easier before you get into trouble and get lost on the trail just going to pee. It's so much easier to just take the freaking compass. And the little backpacking compasses that hang off of your bag, they work fine, man. You just flip it up so it's horizontal. It works good enough to keep you out of trouble, right? So if you don't want to carry around the big old freaking military lensatic compass, get something that you're going to carry and something you can put where you can see it, and just train that in you. Every time you hike, even if you step 20 feet off the trail to go pee, practice that. Look at the direction you're walking off the trail, walk in that direction, make sure you went in that direction, and then once you get there, turn around and get the back azimuth, meaning the 180 degrees from the direction you took in to get back, right? So it's pretty simple math. You walked at 180 degrees this way, you're gonna go 360 or 0 that way. If your average everyday hiker that gets lost on the trail, just walking off of it for a little bit, if they would just carry a freaking compass, they would be totally fine. All right, let's talk about some comfort items real quick. So we've got the basics covered. Now let's just go through a scenario. You're sitting out at camp, it's 40 degrees, you're hanging out, and it just starts to pour. And the news report says it's gonna pour for the rest of the day and the evening, and then it's gonna turn into hail and snow. Good old mountain weather. You want to hang out at your fire alone or with your buddies just getting rained on. Okay, so I know we got rain gear and ponchos and stuff, but one thing you can consider is just bringing a small extra tarp or poncho with you out on your camping trip, and that's what you can put as a temporary shelter or an extra shelter, and that can be near your fire so you're not just sitting in the rain or snow. It could be the small shelter you build away from your camp because you don't want to cook and do all this nastiness too close to your camp, right? If you're worried about bears and stuff. So think about it. You got your tent or your hammock and tarp set up over here. You go over here to do all your cooking and eating and messy stuff. And now you're just like getting rained on while you're trying to eat your food. Guess what most people do? Most people say, screw the bears, screw all that. They bring everything into their tent, and I can't tell you guys what to do, but 99% of the time you're going to be fine, okay? But then there will be that chance where something comes into your camp and you're wondering, what the hell drew this thing in, man? Why do I have to deal with this at 2 in the morning? Oh, it's because I got freaking beef ravioli all over the tent floor. Stupid. You can get super cheap ultralight tarps. They'll pack up to like that. They weigh less than a pound. You barely notice them in their gear. A lot of times I'll bring them with me and I'll totally forget I'll have them. So we'll be working on a fire and it starts raining on us and we're like, well, I guess we're going to hide in our tent now and not enjoy our fire. And my buddy will be like, well, maybe I got an extra tarp on me. And I'll be like, oh, I got one. It's buried in my bag. Cool. Also, if you are tent camping, that extra tarp can be your last piece of shelter. Because think about packing up your tent and everything in pouring down rain or heavy snow, okay? You're going to get to a point where you've got everything in your bag but your tent. Now you've got to try to figure out how to pack up your tent quickly. It's already soaked. Your bag is going to be exposed while you're trying to pack your tent up in some kind of fashion to get out of there, okay? So I've seen people take their rain jacket off and cover their bag and whatever else is not in their bag and pack up their tent. They get their tent put into their ruck somehow, and then they grab their rain jacket. Their rain jacket's soaked, they're soaked, and then the stuff they were trying to protect is soaked. So just think about like a cheaper ultralight tarp that you don't even notice. If it's pouring down raining and you're packing up camp, you could put that up. Just fly it off of the trees. It doesn't matter how, because it's going to be like 5 minutes. And now you can pack all your stuff up. You got your bag nice and packed up, and all you got to do is just rip down this tarp, shove it down in one of your side pockets, and you're good to go. Also, if you're a tent camper, that tarp will give you a temporary shelter if you are hiking and you just want to get out of the elements for a little bit. You're just tired of hiking in the rain. Well, freaking throw up an A-frame real quick, or fly a little lean-to real quick, and there you go. You got a nice little break without having to break out your entire tent. One last thing on comfort is, I'm a grunt. I learned my outdoors experience sleeping in the mud, sitting on the dirt, and just dealing with it, all right? But not everybody likes to do that. Even if it's not currently raining or snowing, if you're in wintry environments, you're sitting around a fire. All the stumps are going to be soaking wet. All the logs on the ground are going to be soaking wet. The ground's going to be soaking wet. So unless you want to put your ultralight thin tent right up next to the fire and risk burning holes in it, what are you going to sit on? As you can see, I've actually cut a lot off of this mat. It's about 3 feet shorter than when I got it. So I use these corners to put my camping stove canister on to get the canister off the cold ground. But also, I've cut a couple horizontal pieces, about 2 foot by 2 foot, maybe 3 by 3, and that just gives you a little sit pad. You could bring a small, lighter hammock that's, it'll pack up to like that and weighs less than a pound, and you can string it up on some trees. So you've got your tent and everything you're going to sleep in, but you've got a nice fire over here. I mean, you're just going to stand on it. The camping stools are pretty cool, and the camping chairs, they're all pretty cool, but you're going to have to spend a lot of money on those to get ultralight versions that aren't going to bug the crap out of you. So I would go with an extra mat to sit on, like doesn't weigh anything, especially if you cut a little square. If it starts to rain while you're hanging out there, well, you're smart. You brought an extra tarp, fly an extra tarp. Now you're freaking hanging out in a hammock out of the elements. You don't have to hide in your tent, and you're just enjoying life while your buddies are miserable. So that's it, guys. I know this was a long one, but I think we covered all of the basics. Again, there will be a list. If it's not down in the description, go to the website, gruntproof.us. You'll have like a little checklist. You can steal all of these ideas. Thanks for sticking with me. If you have any questions, let me know down below. You can always hit me up on the website through the email. And until then, man, get out there and enjoy this stuff, guys. I'll see you out there. Take care.